What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the NHL Strategy Show. I am your host, Josh Harris. Joining me, as always, son Cliffy. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Just an unreal day outside. 20 degrees in the sun, so 70 or whatever Fahrenheit. It was a beautiful day to go for a run today, so I can't complain about that. What I will complain about is how I did last night, because I did not do very well. Went with the Rangers. Obviously, the Rangers didn't get there. Went with Seattle. Jared McCann had a good night. Nobody else really did anything, so I didn't have a good night. I was kind of surprised to check the top of the leaderboards, and Dallas wasn't there. It was a lot of Carolina, a lot of Ottawa last night that got to the tops of the leaderboards. So and I know a lot of people were panicking after, the first 30 minutes of that Dallas-Detroit game, but they didn't end up in too many optimal lineups that I saw. So hopefully people got there with the Carolina or the Ottawa or what have you. How'd you do last night?
I also used the Rangers. I used McCann, used Saros, so that was good. But I also used your client, Brock Nelson, one shot on goal. So I scored over 100 but didn't cash. I'm looking at Jake's lineup, our boss Jake Hari, who finished second in the 15. It was the Minnesota Gaudreau line, Ottawa won because Claude Giroux went nuts. And then you had, Weegar, Zub, and Gustafsson for 178.9, finished in second by 0.4. Classic Jake.
Yeah, those are right. I know he banked like 2 weeks ago now, maybe, but that is kind of the running joke. Is he takes a lot of second place finishes, and when you play those MMEs, you often need some first place finishes to really have a good season. So I know finishing second is good, but hopefully he can crack that first place here tonight, because losing by less than a point is always really grating.
And the 15 last night was disgusting. 5K to first, 2K to second, 500 to fifth. Like, if you're not in the top three, if you're max and whatever it is, 40, you're probably losing money.
Yeah.
They did tell Jake that the GPPs on Thursday should be pretty good because there's no NBA, but if I hold my breath, if you hold your breath, we'll both be dead. So we have another 10 games.
I'm not holding my breath on that. I'm just praying we get good contests for the first round of the playoffs, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it next week.
Yeah, but we have another 10 gamer tonight. We have a couple, you saw the Islanders in a must-win game yesterday absolutely fall flat. There's a couple teams who have some important games today. Obviously, if Pittsburgh wins out now because of the Islanders being idiots, they control their own destiny, so they have a big game tonight. The Hurricanes, it's kind of an important game because if they lose, New Jersey wins. New Jersey jumps them in the division. So New Jersey has something to play for. Pittsburgh has something to play for. Carolina has something to play for. Then you have these really bad teams playing each other that you have to consider. Like, there's a couple games that are kind of real iffy on what is going to happen. Like, the Leafs may start some guy from college tonight. They didn't even, if they can't get Wool up for emergency purposes, they're going to have to start a guy on an ATO. So we'll see what happens there. But, a bunch of guys could be sitting in that game because that, Leafs Tampa Bay game is honestly pretty meaningless here. But basically that I just spoke for 2 minutes. The point I was trying to make is I think I'm going to try to look for teams that have something to play for, or there's kids on bad teams looking to prove that they belong there. So I think that's kind of the strategy that I have in this last week of the season. Didn't work out last night because the Islanders definitely had something to play for and they got worked, but we'll see what happens. Let's get into this late. Before we do, the drill, hit that like, hit that subscribe. Also, make sure to sign up for the Stokastic Hall of Fame by changing your avatar on DraftKings and FanDuel. You can do that by downloading the avatar at stokastic.com/avatar. Got us in the top 3 contests with over 5K contestants, which, in hockey, not sure any season, but there is sports. And if that is the case, you can tweet the win to @StokasticHOF on Twitter. If you don't have Twitter, email us with your screenshot. You get 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. That is a $120 value. And you get access to all of our tools on every sport for a month. You can only win once a year, but getting that free month certainly will help. Also, we are sponsored by Bet365. We'll have a nice deal for you later on in the show. But let's get into the slate.
I just want to jump in real quick. Sorry. We should shout out Chuck Dynasty, because you mentioning that about the Stokastic Hall of Fame reminded me. He banked the nickel last night on FanDuel, and the nickel has over 7,000 people in it. I think on FanDuel. So Chuck Dynasty, congrats on the bank, first of all. Second, there's at least one contest with at least 5,000 people for NHL. So Chuck, you might want to send that into the Stokastic Hall of Fame and get you some free Stokastic memberships if you haven't already.
That's a good idea. And you reminding us about that, let the wheel of on the Awesome Lineup Builder load for me. So that was a very good segue there. Now I can switch it to DraftKings, so I can't be like, oh, wow, this price is ridiculous, and then realize 3 games in that I'm on FanDuel. But I run through the show on DraftKings, so let's get into the first game here. We have the Washington Capitals with a 2.3 total. Heading into Boston, the Bruins have a 3.7 total. Capitals back-to-back on the road. So Kemper played last night. He actually played really well. Charlie Lindgren is probable. Linus Ullmark is confirmed. I haven't seen anything definitive on what Bruins are playing or what Bruins are resting, but this game means nothing. Also, David Pastrnak coming off a hat trick is $10,000. And that's really expensive considering there's Edmonton on the slate, there's Colorado on the slate. Now, Colorado does have something to play for because they can win the division. They just need to keep pace with the Stars. So, Pasternak's been on a absolute heater, but there's 2 games left in the regular season. He could rest. I don't know. You would think they would give him a game here and there. I just don't have much interest on either side.
Yeah, we don't know everybody that's playing because Boston did rest. They have been resting players. They rested some guys on Sunday. I think it was against Philly. They were playing against Philadelphia. But this morning at morning skate, they did have a lot of their regulars doing power play work. So Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, Jake DeBrusk, those guys were on the top power play unit with Hampus Lindholm practicing the power play. And then you had Coyle and Orlov and those guys on the second power play unit. And it looks like Dmitry Orlov, they said, is going to be back tonight. So that's step 1. I think this is the game where you see a lot of Boston players play because Boston only has 1 game left in the regular season. It's Thursday in Montreal. I got to think if they want to get some players in, it's going to be at a home game, and then they can just leave the players here. They wouldn't have to travel with them to Montreal. So that's why I think if Patrice Bergeron is going to play another game before the end of the regular season, I think it would be tonight. And that goes with the other guys they've been resting as well. So I'm going to assume a mostly full lineup for Boston here tonight, which would mean DeBrusk, Bergeron, and Marchand on the top line, and then Zacha, Pastrnak, and Tyler Bertuzzi on the second line because David Krejci is not going to play. So I assume they just go back to Bertuzzi, Zacha, Pastrnak, with Zacha playing center. From a matchup perspective, I don't think it really matters on the Washington side, whether you're going out against Strome and Sheary or that's the other thing too, is Alex Ovechkin might be back for this game because if he was done for the regular season, they would have ruled him out already. And whether he plays today or plays in their final game of the season, I guess we'll find out. But Ovechkin honestly could be in the lineup here tonight as well. It wouldn't change anything for me. I'm still not playing much on the Washington side here. And like I said, I don't think the matchups really matter from a Boston perspective, whether you're going out against, the Strome and Sheary line, whether you're going out against Backstrom and Craig Smith, I don't think it really matters. The Boston top line has been generating a ton lately. 3.8 expected goals for, 4.6 actual goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 over the last 4 weeks, shooting 10%. Like 10% is basically normal for a line that talented. And their goal scoring is like 80% above the league average. Like they are generating a ton of volume. And we know Washington has really struggled defensively. I'm not seeing a lot of ownership on the Boston top line right now. But that's with the lineup that they had over the weekend. We still don't have Patrice Bergeron in there. I got to think if Bergeron comes back, that top line is going to be in the double digits. So they are going to be fairly highly owned. I think this is a situation where you can, like, if Bergeron, Marchand, and DeBrusk are the top line, they look like they're all going to be on the power play. So that's just a power play stack right away. But again, I think it's one of those situations where you can leave off DeBrusk and put in Pasternak, or leave off Marchand and put in Pasternak or something like that. Make it, keep it a power play stack, but include Pasternak in those stacks, because the Washington penalty kill, it's just fallen apart over the last 6 weeks. It was something that had kept their season afloat somewhat through the first 4 months, but it's just really fallen apart basically since the All-Star game. So I think it's not a bad power play matchup for Boston either, even though the power play hasn't really been that good. So I really, really do like Boston one here. I just think if I were to play the Bruins, I would probably find a way to get Pasternak into my stack, because it is a pretty good power play matchup for them. And like I said, on the other side, whether Ovechkin plays or not, it doesn't change anything for me. I'm not in on Washington here. You're muted, eh?
Struggle bus. Yeah, I am muted. I said I've been off. We have people laying pipe upstairs, so we have. I've been kind of off Boston outside of Pasternak for the past 3 weeks or so, but like, I don't know. Like, this game could get out of hand real quickly, and that top line do heavy damage. So yeah, I guess I kind of agree. I don't know if I'm going to play them in my one lineup, but like, if I was playing 20, if I was playing whatever the max you can play on DraftKings is, 50 or whatever, yeah, I'd have some Boston one for sure.
I mean, they're just not that expensive, right? Like 18,200 for that top line. It's cheaper than the second line. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I do like Boston one.
Yeah. Detroit Red Wings with a 2.3 total heading into Carolina. The Hurricanes have a 3.7. Magnus Hellberg and Antti Ranta are probable. Both these teams played last night. I know Carolina for sure played last night.
Yeah, Detroit got their brains beat in.
Dallas
scored on 5 of their first 10 shots.
Oh, right. Yeah, they played Dallas. I completely blacked out that game after I saw 5-0. I'll make it quick. Out on Detroit. I am not stacking a team going into Carolina. I don't care if they're back to back or not. And here we are with the question: do you want to play Carolina one again? Like, I guess you could. I don't know. I'm more interested in some other teams tonight, like the Devils, the Penguins. This is like Carolina one would be more of an MME play for me. I guess you could go to Carolina 2, but like they're in double digits. I don't know. I know they have a 3.7 total. So do the Bruins. And I guess if I had to choose between the Bruins and the Hurricanes, I'd play the Bruins. Like, that's how not super high on them in one lineup. But I think in MME, I think you can get to both top 6 lines here.
Yeah. First, I mean, I agree with you on the Detroit side. We should mention that both teams changed up their lines during the games, their respective games last night. So there's no guarantee on what the lines are going to look like at warmups. Like Jonathan Berggren jumped to the top line with Perron and Larkin for Detroit, while Joe Veleno was playing with Andrew Kopp and Lucas Raymond. On the Carolina side, Stefan Nason jumped to the top line with Aho and Jarvis, I think it was, towards the end of the game. And Nason had been on the top power play unit with Aho. So we're going to have to see what the lineup looks like. I think we've seen the end of Teravainen on the top line. Him and Aho just really haven't been playing well together this season. Teravainen just really hasn't been playing well this season. I was looking at some of his underlying numbers earlier, and like especially things like his shots and shot selection are just absolutely terrible. So I think Teravainen off the top line seems like a given, and I think it's going to be Jarvis, Aho, and Nason. Maybe Natchez, Aho, and Nason. We'll see. But Aho and Nason are both on the top power play unit together. Detroit doesn't take a ton of penalties. They're basically bang on league average, and the penalty kill has been better of late. But Stefan Nason does make a pretty big difference on the top power play unit for Carolina. I know people might laugh at that, but he's kind of filling that Alex Chiasson role on the Detroit side, right? Like he's kind of like a digger, grinder, net front type that appears to be opening some lanes for the more skilled players on the power play. So if Nason's on the top line with Aho, whether it's Natchez on the other side or whomever, whether it's Jarvis, I have interest in Aho, Nason, whomever, assuming that's what the top line is going to be, because I think it's going to be pretty cheap. At worst, they're going to stay on the top power play unit together. And I don't think it's going to be a very common combination, because even when, Nason is in the lineup and on the top power play unit, he's at a fraction of the ownership of the top Carolina guys. So I really do have a lot of interest in something like Aho, Nason, Jarvis, Aho, Nason, Natchez. We're just going to have to see what the lineup looks like when warm-ups hit. But that would be one of my more favorite kind of fillery type stacks here, because Nason is so cheap, right? If it's Jarvis and Nason, those two guys are 6,100 like combined. You add in Aho, and it's like a $12,000 top line stack. So I'm going to be very interested to see what the Carolina top line looks like at warm up. Like I said, if Nason is there, there's a pretty good chance they're going to end up in my lineup. I'm out on the Carolina depth. Just too much ownership for what they're actually doing. I'd rather just go to the top line for me. And they're also probably going to get some of that Dylan Larkin matchup, because they're getting Aho away from the top line matchups when they're at home. So it just puts them in a worse matchup as it is. So, yeah, I'm with you. Nothing on the Detroit side for me. Carolina won. As long as Nason's on the top line and warm up, I'm going to have quite a bit of interest in whatever they put together.
Yeah, I mean, if Jarvis is with Aho, I will also have interest. Jarvis plays his best hockey with Aho, and it's not close. So, and that line's super cheap. It's not like 15. So, adding Carolina one to my list, assuming that is the cheap line. Let's move on to the next one here. Another important game. Buffalo Sabres with a 2.8 total heading into New Jersey. The Devils have a 4.1 total. Sabres beat the Rangers in a shootout last night. I would be shocked if Devin Levi doesn't go back-to-back here. I'm expecting him to be the goalie. Vitek Vanacek is confirmed. Devils have a monster total here. I guess it would probably... Like, there's two ways I think I want to do this here. I think with the Devils here, I would just straight up power play stack or go with the Heischer line. I don't know if I would full on stack the Hughes line. I think Hughes one-off is fine, but if I'm going to full stack something, it's going to be the Heischer line. But I think my favorite would be a power play stack, and I know Timo's on the third line, and he's expensive, but he will certainly be lower owned. On the Buffalo side, I don't know, like Casey Middlestad still up on that top line. He's pretty cheap, but he's been playing well for DFS with those guys. So no ownership. I think I can take a stab on Buffalo one here.
I'm going to go the opposite direction. I have no interest in the Buffalo top line here tonight. It's just the Hischier matchup, right? You're going into that Hischier to Tara Mercer matchup. They've been really, really good all season long. I was just looking up over the last 5 weeks. So basically going back to early March, that Hischier line, 1.9 expected goals against per 60 minutes, 1.9 actual goals against. Like, they've just been dynamite defensively. That's what's kind of keeping me away from Buffalo 1 and more interested in Buffalo 2. That Thompson, Cousins, Greenway line. One thing I didn't mention on the show yesterday, and I'll mention now, is Jordan Greenway, at least in Minnesota, did a pretty good job of getting to the net. Like, he was often stuck in shutdown roles and checking line roles and things like that. But when he was on the ice, he was generating between 40 and 50% of the team's expected goals, which means Jordan Greenway was generating 40 to 50%, and the other 4 players on the ice were generating the other 50 to 60%. So he was doing a tremendous job of getting to the net, which I think is something that can help, a Cousins and Tage Thompson duo, where they are such good dual threats, both with their playmaking and their shooting. I kind of like that line combination. Like, Tage and Cousins don't have a huge sample together, but in roughly 45 minutes, they're at about 38 shots for and 38 shots against per 60 minutes. It's just really high event offensively and defensively. So I don't really mind that Buffalo 2 line, Thompson, Cousins, Greenway. I think that's where I would go if I was going to go to the Buffalo side, but I'm going to be honest. This is more of a New Jersey game for me. I'm gonna kind of agree with you on the power play stacking. It's not that New Jersey has a good power play. In fact, they really don't. Like, their current power play since Timo Meier got there, 6.2 goals per 60 minutes. Like, that's a little worse than average. Like, that's not good. But the Buffalo penalty kill is atrocious. Like, genuinely one of the worst in the league. It has been all season. I think New Jersey can take advantage of that. So I think it's definitely another one of those situations where you can do the double center, Hischier, Hughes, Bratt, Hischier, Hughes, Meier, Hughes, Bratt, Meier, things like that. I agree with you. I think just like Boston, I don't mind just straight up using New Jersey 2 here, but I think I would lean more towards a power play stack just because of how bad Buffalo's penalty kill has been. So that's where I am in this game. New Jersey 2, more likely a New Jersey power play stack, maybe Buffalo 2, but I feel like that'd be more of an MME play than a single entry for me here tonight.
Yeah, Buffalo's MME play. I should have clarified that. I mean, as they're going to stat, and maybe I'd take a stab on Buffalo too. I see my internet is back to being absolutely atrocious, but we have one more game before the ad read. Columbus Blue Jackets with a 2.9 total heading into Philadelphia. The Flyers have a 3.8 total. Michael Hutchinson, Carter are probable. And the Flyers have a huge total here. Columbus has a pretty big total for them. I think I have interest in both top lines here.
I have interest in a lot. What I don't have interest in is all the ownership in this game. I'm looking at the Frost, Farabee, Konecny line coming in at 12% owned. That Tippett, Cates, Allison line at 7.4% owned. It just seems really high. Like, I know it's the Columbus Blue Jackets. Columbus is bad. Like, that, I'm not saying that they're not. Like, there's not some sort of hidden trick here. I just don't know if the Flyers are really any good at all. The other thing we should mention is we don't really know what the Flyers lines are going to be, which has kind of been the situation with the Flyers like all season now. Guess what? They broke up their lines in the third period of the last game and didn't have a morning skate today. Big surprise. What they did do was leave Morgan Frost and Travis Konecny together, and then they left Noah Cates and Owen Tippett together. And then I think they left Kevin Hayes and James Van Riemsdyk together, and then they just moved everybody else around. So, like, there are pairs of players you can rely on. Frost and Konecny, Cates and Tippett, Hayes and Van Riemsdyk. Like, there are pairs you can rely on. I just three-man stacking the forwards from the Philadelphia Flyers at this point of the season just feels like absolute insanity. The Frost Travis Konechny duo is the one I do have interest in. Now, those are the guys that are going to come in the highest owned, but they actually have less negative leverage than the Tippett line because they are more expensive. There's not going to be as much ownership on them. And, Joel Farabee might not be on that line when warm-ups start at 6:30 Eastern or whatever it is. It might be Owen Tippett. It might be Noah Cates. You might see you might be Scott Lawton. You might see different people up there. So even though that Philly top line is projected for heavy ownership, you might be able to get them at much lower ownership, considering that we don't really know what the lines are going to be until warm-ups start. So I will say right off the bat, I have interest in that Philly top line, at the very least of Frost and Konechny. Now, Konechny is on the top power play unit. They typically use Noah Cates in a shutdown role, so I assume Cates will be going out against the Columbus top line, the Jenner Goodrow line. And then that leaves Frost and Travis Konechny against the second and third lines from Columbus, and there's just nothing there to defend anymore at this point of the season. So I think it's just a great 5-on-5 matchup for them. So Konechny, Frost, and Farabee is my favorite Philly line. I'm not sold that Farabee is going to be there at warm-ups, so just pay attention to warm-ups. Frost, like I said, Frost and Konechny, they've been generating a lot when they've been on the ice. 130 minutes together, 3.1 expected goals. They're just missing the net on a few too many shots. Lots of ice time, generating good offense. I think there could be a top line combination here that comes in low owned because of jumbled lines at warm up. So I really do like that Frost Konechny duo at a minimum here on the Philly side. But there, if you want to go down and use the cheaper Philly guys, I don't have like an out and out problem with that. It's just if I'm gonna play guys that are coming in with negative leverage, I'm just going to play the best players that are coming in with negative leverage. And Travis Konechny is by far this team's best forward. So that's just where I'll go in a nutshell. On the Columbus side, like it's basically just the top line. I mean, I know people might want to go to that Rozovic, Johnson, Fix, Wolanski line, especially if you're playing super expensive Edmonton or Colorado that we'll get to later. In a case like that, it is fine because there isn't much to worry about on the Philly side. But the Columbus top line has actually been generating 2.8 expected goals over the last 4 weeks, which, that's something. They're all playing 20 minutes plus. Like Marchenko has 15 shots in his last 5 games. The big knock on him earlier in the season was that he wasn't shooting enough and relying on shooting 25 to 30%. Now he's actually putting up shot volume. So I really don't mind Columbus one here, but they're coming in with a fair bit of ownership as well. So all things being equal, I'll take the home team and I'll take the Philly top line. I'll take Konechny and Frost here.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be a popular spot anyway, just because these teams suck and they have some good offensive players. So I think my biggest issue with this game is my internet going in and out, and it's driving me nuts. But we are, as we mentioned off the top, we are sponsored by Bet365, and we can get you a good deal. All you got to do is click the link in the description below, make a deposit, sign up, make a deposit, bet $1. You can get $200 in free credits. It gets, even if you lose the bet, you get the $200 in bet credits. There is golf coming up this week. There's obviously NHL playoffs coming up. There's a ton of stuff to bet on. You can bet on McDavid scoring tonight. It's even money right now on Bet365. It's better than any other book out there. So, yeah, go bet the McDavid goal prop. Even if it loses, you get $200 in bet credits. So click that link in the description below, sign and get after it. And if you or anyone else you know has a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. Let's move on to the next one. Toronto Maple Leafs with a 2.9 total heading into Tampa Bay. The Lightning have a 3.6 total. No idea who's starting for the Leafs. They haven't started Samsonov back-to-back all season. Looks like Vasilevsky is confirmed. This is interesting because, as I mentioned off the top, the Leafs are trying to call up Joseph Woll on an emergency basis, but if they can't, they may start some kid out of college. So if that's the case, I do have some interest in Tampa Bay. This game is kind of meaningless, though. They're going to play each other in the playoffs, but I don't know. I'm not sure if these guys are going to play big minutes or they're going to just work on stuff. But if it is a Zamboni driver in net for the Leafs, I do have interest in Tampa top line.
Yeah. It is the goaltending situation that we have to talk about first. So obviously what's happened here is that a team after the trade deadline, a team can carry as many players as they want on their roster as long as they're cap compliant. So you have to stay under the salary cap. Obviously, Toronto is right up against the cap, and Matt Murray is injured. And you know, if a goalie goes down with an injury in morning skate or something like that, you're allowed to call somebody up under emergency recall purposes. It's just for that one game, and then they get sent back down. What happened with Toronto was Murray got hurt, and then instead of calling up another goaltender, so they would have two goaltenders on the roster, they went and signed Matthew Knies, that college player, and put him on the roster instead. And then they tried to call up a goalie under emergency conditions, and what the NHL said was, no, you had the opportunity to call the goalie up, you chose to sign a forward instead. And you can't create your own emergency conditions, which is pretty much what Toronto did. And that's why they can't get one of their AHL goalies to the game. And that's why I don't think they're going to be able to get one, because the emergency conditions that existed yesterday are the same ones that existed today. And if the NHL wouldn't let them call up Woll for yesterday's game, I don't know why they would let them for today unless they change the rules on the fly. And Ilya Samsonov might be their only healthy goalie going into the playoffs, which start in less than a week, mind you. And he made 45 saves in an overtime win last night. So they're clearly not going to start Samsonov and risk any sort of injury with playoffs in 6 days. That's why they might actually have to go with a college signed goalie, just a goalie that they're literally going to pick up off the street today to start tonight. And that's why what happens with Toronto, and we don't know right now, we probably won't know for a few hours yet, at least until 5:30 Eastern, maybe even 6:30 Eastern. We won't know who's going to be in net for Toronto. I suspect one way or another, it's going to be some sort of college signee they just grabbed off the street. And in that sort of situation, it's hard not to play Tampa Bay here. The first thing is, the top line with Hagel there was still generating a ton of offense before Hagel was moved off. In the last 4 weeks with Hagel on the top line for Tampa Bay, they're scoring 3 goals per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. That's about 20% better than league average, and they have a shooting percentage below league average. The reason they're scoring so much is because they're just generating so many shots. On top of that, they're probably going to avoid the Toronto 1 matchup. They had been using Stamkos and Nick Paul and Killorn in a shutdown role when they were together earlier in the season. Whether they do that again, we don't know for sure. I'm just guessing that you're going to see that Kucherov and point line get the second and third lines from Toronto. And those lines have struggled defensively, even with Ryan O'Reilly there. So I really don't mind the Tampa top line here tonight. Kucherov, Point, Hagel. They're coming in 1% to 2% ownership. They're expensive, but they're not they're not Edmonton or Colorado expensive. They're only $20,300 on DraftKings. No ownership, like I said. I think it might be a fine matchup for Tampa Bay 1, depending on what Toronto's goalie situation looks like. Tampa 2, I'm not super excited about. I know Stamkos and Killorn are on the top power play unit, but they really weren't generating a lot of offense. 2.6 expected goals per 60 minutes together this season. The only reason they're scoring is because they're shooting 15%. That's just way, way too high. Steven Stamkos is under 2 shots per game over his last 20 games. That's a quarter of the season, and he's under 2 shots per game in that stretch. I just think there's too many concerns with Tampa 2 to go in that direction, especially if they get the shutdown role. So it's Tampa 1 for me. I don't know about the Toronto side. I don't have interest in the Toronto top line in its current iteration. We went over that yesterday about how much Matthews and Marner and Bunting had struggled earlier this season. They didn't look that great last night. They played reasonably well, but they didn't look overly dangerous as they had basically all last season. So that would get me down to the Toronto second line, with Tavares, Nylander, and Ryan O'Reilly. I think you're fine to do that. They have been generating quite a bit when they've been playing together, 67 shot attempts per 60 minutes. You get 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play unit. I think Toronto 2 is playable, but I think Tampa 1 is easily my favorite line in this game.
Yeah, same. I mean, they're not going to start Samsonov. He hasn't started a back-to-back all season. They're not going to do it now, a week before the playoffs.
No. I honestly think they dress like Luke Shen in net before they played Samsonov tonight. And I say that kind of jokingly, but not really.
Yeah, no, and they can't even use the guys that they had backing up Samsonov the past few days because they signed him to the 1-day contract or whatever it is. And then, they can't use him. So they're going to literally, like the Zamboni driver in Tampa literally could be the goalie for Toronto tonight.
It's going to be an interesting game.
Yeah, and if that guy goes down, like you said, like Luke Shen literally could be in that.
Yeah.
That could be fun. We'll be putting on my Tampa Bay. I don't have a Tampa jersey, but it is Stamkos' 1,000th game tonight. So take that for what you will. If you live on Narrative Street, maybe he'll have an extra shot. He'll get to like 2 shots instead of 1 tonight. Chicago Blackhawks.
Hold on. Literally just came across my Twitter. Joseph Woll is now listed on the Maple Leafs roster.
Come on.
Something happened that they changed the rules, and I just can't wait to see what happened because it's the Toronto Maple Leafs, and if the NHL bends the rules just for the Toronto Maple Leafs, it's going to make the next couple days extremely entertaining in the hockey world.
Yeah. Joseph Woll. I still have interest in Tampa 1.
Oh yeah, it's not like Wall is like Igor Shesterkin stepping into the lineup or something like that. It's just I would have had more interest if they were literally just grabbing some guy out of the stands and telling him to play goal.
Hilarious. Like when what's his face, the guy who played the Italian guy in WWE, he won like the Intercontinental title out of the crowd. He was the guy who got eliminated in the Royal Rumble in like 3 seconds and said he wasn't ready.
Santino Marella.
Yeah. Santino Marella on net tonight for the Leafs. Chicago Blackhawks with a 2.2 total heading into Pittsburgh. The Penguins have a 4.3 total. Peter Mrazek probably going to start tonight. Stalock went last night in Minnesota. Tristan Jarry confirmed. This is a huge game for the Penguins. If they win out now, they control their own destiny. So, they have a very easy last 2 games. Blackhawks back-to-back on the road. Now here, the issue here is the Pittsburgh top line coming in with very, very heavy ownership. I think push comes to shove here. You put a gun to my head. I'm playing Malkin Raquel here. Raquel is the forward that I want in my lineup. He's on the top power play unit. You want to go to that top line, perfectly fine. But I'm going to take half the ownership, get a little price discount, get 2 guys on the top power play unit, and go about my day. But I will say I think Pittsburgh 1 is an excellent option tonight.
Should we be worried that the Chicago Blackhawks really aren't that bad defensively? Like, I was looking at their defensive numbers. Now, this is basically just going back to the trade deadline. So, like 18 to 20 games for most teams. Chicago Blackhawks, by expected goals against, are better than teams like Tampa, Calgary, Toronto, Minnesota. Now, the goaltending has let them down, but even the actual goals against isn't even like that bad. It's like fringe bottom 10 in the league, but it's not horrific. And the Chicago penalty kill was something that was, a big Achilles heel for this team but it has gotten better as the season's gone on to the point where it's not like like the Vancouver Canucks in the first 2 months of the season. Like that's where Chicago was basically, and it's certainly not that anymore. I know it's back-to-back on the road. Chicago's not a good team, but like I'm kind of worried about just like running out and just jamming 20% Pittsburgh on a 10-game slate. You know what I mean? It's just a little bit concerning for me. I think I agree with you though, in the sense that Pittsburgh second line has been generating a lot. They've actually been generating more expected goals per 60 minutes than the top line over the last few weeks, to the point where they're at 3.4 per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. One big problem is that they're missing the net in over 50% of their shot attempts. That's not what you want to see. We'll talk about Nikolai Ehlers in the next game for why that's a problem. And they're not playing super heavy minutes either, right? Like I was looking at their recent games, like 14 to 17 minutes for all three guys, with Zucker and Raquel being on the lower end, Malkin on the higher end. The top line's all at like 19 to 21 or 19 to 20, sorry. That's just kind of the problem, is like you're getting an extra 3 or 4 minutes. But if you want to do something like we talked about with New Jersey, and do like Crosby, Malkin, Raquel, or Crosby, Gensel, Raquel, or Crosby, Malkin, Gensel, or something like that, I think you can do that. But I'm not certain about power play stacking Pittsburgh here, because the Pittsburgh power play is not that great. And like we said, Chicago penalty kill is not good, but it's not horrific like it was earlier in the year, and they don't take a ton of penalties. I think I'm kind of with you here. I think I'd rather just slip in Pittsburgh 2 and then be on my way, and not pay that exorbitant price for the top line. Not get the 20% ownership that they're probably going to come in at in certain contests, and get the line that just has been generating more expected goals over the last few weeks. So I'm with you on Pittsburgh 2. Both Pittsburgh top lines are fine. Pittsburgh power play stack, all that's fine. I'm just trying to, narrow things down a little bit. So I would say Pittsburgh 2. On the Chicago side, this is interesting. I don't have a ton of interest in Chicago per se, but they're not that expensive. And Athanasiou and Anders Bjork, at least in a small sample, have been generating a lot. 3.1 expected goals per 60 minutes, 69 shot attempts per 60 minutes in nearly 60 minutes together. Athanasiou has 32 shots on goal and 9 points in his last 10 games. Hey, I think there's some merit to using like Athanasiou and Bjork, or just an Athanasiou one-off or something like that. I think there is merit to using some of the Chicago guys here. But obviously, it's the Pittsburgh side that we should be focusing on. And I kind of agree with you. I do like Pittsburgh too here.
Yeah, I don't mind an Athanasiou one-off, just because Pittsburgh is trash defensively. Yari isn't very good in net. Like, even if Pittsburgh makes it into the playoffs, I have a hard time believing they'll go on a long run. But, like, Athanasiou is all offense, no defense. So, you don't care about defense for DFS and that purpose. But Athanasiou one-off is fine. I definitely wouldn't full stack. Pittsburgh is a different question, just because they're kind of expensive. I think I'd rather play Colorado. I'd rather play Edmonton, or I'd rather play New Jersey, something like that. Just from an ownership standpoint, you know what I mean? Like 20% Pittsburgh 1. I don't know. I just rather play Malkin Raquel.
Like I know like Pittsburgh has that monster total. I don't see a colossal difference between New Jersey and Pittsburgh here tonight. Like New Jersey still has a 4.1 total. And they're coming in fractions the ownership of Pittsburgh. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. The NHL is going to try to get Crosby in the playoffs, though. Take my shots when I can get them. Winnipeg Jets at the 2.7 total. Heading into Minnesota, the Wild have a 2.8 total. I would imagine it's going to be Hellebuck on the back-to-back. Haven't seen anything yet. Like, if they win, they're in. And then they can rest him in the final game of the season. Marc-Andre Fleury is confirmed for the Wild. Both these teams are on a back-to-back. And I see Nick asking, anyone knows if Kaprizov is playing? And Cliffy and I were talking about this for a few minutes before the show. We hadn't heard anything definitive. Cliffy did some digging. And what does Cliffy say?
Yeah. For anybody that is just tuning in for today, Minnesota played last night and they rested a bunch of their big stars. Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Zuccarello, Jonas Brodin, Jared Spurgeon, they all stayed in Minnesota. None of them played last night. Now, obviously, with the team playing last night and the travel and all that, there's no morning skate or anything like that today. We're probably going to get a coach's availability maybe 2 hours before puck drops. So maybe we get some sort of indication about an hour before lock of what the Minnesota lineup is going to look like. But Michael Russo, who writes for The Athletic and covers Minnesota, said that the plan, at least specifically for Kaprizov, was that he was not going to play both these games. He wasn't going to play last night and tonight. It was going to be one or the other, or likely be one or the other. And that he felt good upon returning from injury over the weekend. And there's no setback or anything like that upon his return. So I would expect at a bare minimum to see Kaprizov back in the lineup tonight. I think you're going to see all of Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Spurgeon, and Brodin, certainly anybody that's healthy enough to play, in the lineup here tonight. Minnesota technically still does have something to play for. They can catch first place in the division, basically, based on how Colorado does. I know they don't seem super stoked about playing guys, considering they just lost Joel Eriksson-Ek. So maybe they played a little bit more cautious. I think that might apply to the defensemen more. At a bare minimum, Kaprizov is probably going to be in. I assume Kaprizov and Zuccarello are both going to be in, and that would give us the top line back of Kaprizov, Zuccarello, and Ryan Hartman. Now, that line hadn't played a ton lately because, Kaprizov missed a few weeks. I think Hartman missed some time before that. So they only have 70 minutes together going back 6 weeks, but 3.1 expected goals for in that span. They had been generating quite a bit. Like Kaprizov skated over 20 minutes in his return. So I don't have any real problems about ice time or anything like that. I don't mind that Minnesota top line. It's just, I don't know if we're going to get confirmation that that is actually going to be the top line before lock hits. That's kind of the only problem here. I mean, that and, facing off against Connor Hellebuck. I wouldn't have a problem playing that Minnesota line, though, because there's not going to be any ownership on them. Like, we just don't know who's going to be playing, right? So with that line, not coming in with a whole lot of ownership, they are kind of expensive as well. Like, that's one of the problems. I think they're 18,800. So, if they're not in, you're probably going to have to go to some sort of Vancouver stack or some sort of cheap Colorado stack. But I do think there are spots you can pivot to if something happens and Minnesota rests their players again and you have a Minnesota stack. I do think there are swaps you can make. And I think at least if you're playing, 15, 30, 50, 100 lineups, I think it's at least worth having a few with Hartman, Zuccarello, and Kaprizov. I'm not going to be chasing the Boldy Johansson line. I'm going to let other people do that. I got burned on that last night. I just don't think it's a great matchup for them besides. On the Winnipeg side, kind of tempted here. And by the way, this is one of the swaps you can make. If you go with Hartman, Zuccarello, Kaprizov, and they're not playing, you can basically just swap right over to Winnipeg one. Connor, Dubois, Scheifele. They're up over 110 minutes, 3.7 expected goals for, 3.7 actual goals for. Scheifele's not shooting a ton, but he looked good last night, I thought. Boys laying pipe upstairs.
I'll mute my mic.
But I do like that Winnipeg one. I just want to talk about Nikolai Ehlers real quick. We talked a lot about what's wrong with his season. He's missing the net is one huge problem. I mentioned that in our Discord. He's only hitting the net on something like 45% of his shot attempts this season. He's usually around 56%. And it's costing him 3/4 of a shot on goal every single game, which means 1.5 shots every 2 games, which means 1 goal like every 11 games. Like, he's missing the net like way, way more than anybody with his level of minutes should. And there's something weird going on there because he's shooting a lot, but he's just not hitting the net. So I would stick with Winnipeg 1, but I'm going to be honest, other than maybe a low-owned Minnesota 1, I don't have interest in stacking anything in this game.
Let me unmic. There we go. Yeah, I don't either, but if Kaprizov is in, you get that late confirmation that it is Minnesota 1 line. Wouldn't mind taking a stab in MME just because they're not going to have any ownership. If you click the link in the description below, you can get the first 9 days of an MLB package, which includes everything on our site for $9. They get projections, ownership, Discord, top stacks or top pitcher, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have the read up because it was my internet, but you know what it is. You can click the link in the description below. If you can't, if it's not working for you, you can go to stokastic.com and use promo code PLAYBALL. That is the first 9 days of a Stokastic MLB package for $9. Let's move on to the main event of the evening. Edmonton Oilers with a 3.4 total heading into Colorado. The Avalanche have a 3.3 total. Stuart Skinner, Alexander Georgiev are confirmed. This is quite a game here because the Oilers' top line is $24,000. The Oilers' top line is currently projected for 1.5%. Avalanche's penalty kill, not very good. Edmonton feasts on the power play. On the flip side, I know the Oilers are pretty decent defensively, but like this Colorado 1 line just runs people over. And their goaltending has been a bit shaky. And they're not getting a ton of ownership compared to like Pittsburgh or New Jersey. I'm going to be hard-pressed not to have either of these top lines. One of them in my line obviously can't fit both, but I think in my 1 lineup, I'm probably going to have one of these top lines.
This is what's making it tough for me to click in Colorado is that Cale Makar is still not expected to play. And oddly enough, it's not 5-on-5 really where Makar makes a big impact, at least for the top guys, like for the lesser guys. He certainly does. But for the top guys, like they pretty much generate offense. Doesn't matter who's on the blue line. Like it could be Makar and Taves, or it could be Curtis McDermott and Jack Johnson. They're generating offense. Like it's actually impressive in a way. But the power play is the problem. The numbers across the board over the last couple seasons, the top power play unit get a fair bit worse without Makar. Was between shot generation and goal scoring anywhere from 15 to 20% lower with anybody but Makar running the top power play unit. And that's a problem because Colorado is like, they don't require a bunch of power play goals to have DFS value, but man, it sure does make life a whole lot easier. And like, I agree with you in a nutshell. The Colorado top line is like very much fine here. And I think you can do something like leave off Evan Rodriguez, add Devin Taves, basically keeps the stack price the same, and you make it like a more of a full-blown power play stack. Because even though the power play does struggle more without Makar, the Oilers do take a lot of penalties. I think they're the 6th most penalized team in the league or something like that. So Colorado might just get there on the power play through attrition alone and not necessarily through great play. So I don't mind Colorado 1 here, especially where they have been using the Colorado second line, the Mulligan-Nichushkin line, in a shutdown role at times. Not a lot, but enough to where the McKinnon line should get a handful of shifts against the Edmonton second and third lines. And I think at least the second line is a much worse defensive line for Edmonton. So I do like Colorado 1 here, even without Makar. I don't think you have to play Rodriguez. Just be aware that there is concern about how good the Colorado power play actually is without Makar running it. On the Edmonton side, oh boy, I live for slates where you have this kind of ownership on the Edmonton top guys. Like you said, the Colorado penalty kill, even as it's gotten better lately, is still like not a top 10 penalty kill in the league. And that's with it improving over the last 6 weeks. So they're starting from a pretty bad spot. Edmonton top line has been shredding all season long. I know that their ice time is down of late, but if you look at the recent games, it's because they're beating the brains out of everybody. Like Connor McDavid's not going to play 23 minutes if you're beat Anaheim 6-1. You know what I mean? So like, I'm not worried about the recent downturn in ice time. I don't think you have to play Zach Hyman. That's one thing that, like, McDavid, Nugent-Hopkins, and Draisaitl have all been producing at an absurd rate over the last 5 or 6 weeks, and Hyman has not. In fact, Hyman has just 37 shots on goal in his last 15 games, or 2.5 shots per game. He was at like 4 shots per game earlier in the season. So I don't even think you have to include Hyman. Like, you can just do like McDavid, Nugent-Hopkins, Evan Bouchard or something like that. And that's not like super expensive. I think there are a lot of ways to stack here. All things being equal, I would prefer the Edmonton side here. They have their full complement of players, whereas Colorado doesn't. But yeah, I'm with you. I think there's a lot to like on both sides here.
Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has 52 power play points this season. 52.
Honestly, I would have assumed that was just a Sarah. But because what he's been doing is absolutely over half his points have been on the power play.
It's absurd. It's absurd the season he's having. No one talks about him. He's having an unbelievable season. Vancouver Canucks with a 3.6 total heading into Anaheim. The Ducks have a 3 total. Thatcher Demko, Lucas Dostal is confirmed. Oh, Rick Tocchet, baby. Taking Kuzmenko off the top power play, taking Beauvillier off the top power play for Philip DiGiuseppe. That makes the Vancouver second line fully correlated on the power play against the worst defensive team in hockey. They're getting rightfully high ownership as pipe is being laid. I really wanted to play the Pettersson line with Kravtsov and Kuzmenko if Kuzmenko was on the top power play here, because they're not getting nearly the same amount of ownership. I guess you still can 5-5. The Ducks are abysmal at any strength. But like with that fully correlated line and Philip DiGiuseppe at 3,600, it's kind of hard to ignore that JT Miller line because they're not that expensive and they're fully correlated.
I'm going to start on the Anaheim side here. And if you want to talk about leaving Kuzmenko off the power play, which Andrei Kuzmenko has as many power play goals this year as Austin Matthews, and you're leaving Kuzmenko off the power play. I mean, I get it if you're trying to lose games, but Vancouver's actually one of those teams that's trying to win every game imaginable down the stretch, which is why Quinn Hughes is playing like 29 minutes a night for some reason. Vancouver is leaving Kuzmenko off the power play, it looks like. Anaheim's doing the same thing with Troy Terry. I don't know if people saw that over the weekend. Anaheim has a top power play unit of Henrique, McTavish, Strome, and Zegras, and Troy Terry is on the second power play unit. Now, if people want to know why that's such a big deal, it's because the Anaheim power play generates 29% more shots and 40% more goals with Troy Terry on the top power play unit than without him. But they're putting Troy Terry on the second power play unit. This is one of the ways that management and coaches sneak tank games without appearing to tank. It's not, oh, I'm scratching Troy Terry and he's not playing tonight. It's, oh, Troy Terry's not on the top power play unit for some reason. We're going to put Adam Henrique there instead. That's how you tank games. I'm almost kind of proud of Dallas Eakins. Like that kind of sneak tanking you don't see very often, and I think it's something to be commended because it's impressive in its own way. But for that reason, like I don't have a ton of interest in anything on the Anaheim side. Like if you're going to make your power play intentionally worse, it doesn't make me want to play those guys, especially where they're probably going to come in over owned. Like if anything, it would be the Terry Henry McTavish line I would play. I want the line with Troy Terry on it. They've been generating a good amount of expected goals. Troy Terry has 5 points in 4 games since he returned from, I think it was, he had a kid. His wife had a kid. So it would be, that Troy Terry line, but it's just frustrating he's not on the power play. On the Vancouver side, it's just straight power play stacking. I'm at the point where I can't make a Vancouver stack without Pettersson. That's just kind of what it is. So I think it's the same thing that you would do with New Jersey's double center stack, add a winger. So like Pettersson, Miller, DiGiuseppe, Pettersson, Miller, Besser, Pettersson with Miller, Besser, DiGiuseppe, all 4 of them if you want. It'd be some sort of power play stack on the Vancouver side.
Yeah, I think you have to include Pettersson. Like that power play is just going through him. So he is very expensive, but DiGiuseppe makes it a little bit more palatable at his price. Last game of the night, Seattle Kraken with a 2.9 total. Heading into Vegas, the Golden Knights have a 3.5 total. Party Marty Jones in net, or he's probable. Grubauer went last night. Laurent Brossoit confirmed for Vegas. I'm actually kind of shocked that there isn't much ownership on Seattle. They went nuts last night. Vegas isn't very good defensively. They don't have a very good penalty. Like, obviously, they don't take a lot of penalties. I think the lowest in the league. But, like, their 5-on-5 lines, look at them. Like, they're not very good. So, I don't know. I kind of like going back to the McCann line a little bit here. I know I was off them yesterday and it burned me. But, like, for no ownership in MME with a 2.9 total, definitely have interest in the Beniers line. On the Vegas side, I don't know, man. They have a 3.5 total, and you got to consider them, but none of these lines are sticking out to me.
Yeah, I think the problem with Seattle is like outside the McCann line, what are you really playing, right? Like Alex Wenberg with Brandon Tanev, like is that the stack? I don't think so. You have Tolvanen and Gord, which is great, but then they're playing with Jesper Froden. I don't like. Are people running out to play Jesper Froden on the road? In a row back-to-back.
Jesper Froden is a hobbit, and you cannot convince me otherwise. That guy lives in the Shire.
I mean, good for him. It's a beautiful spot. So that's just kind of the problem with the Seattle side is like, where do you go if you don't play the McCann line? Like, I would go to Tolvanen and Gord, but that would basically be it for me. So I'm with you. It'd be back to the McCann, Beniers, Eberle line or nothing. The problem here is like Marchessault and Nick Roy have actually played pretty well together whenever they do get ice time together. Whether they can do that with this current top line with Dorofeyev remains to be seen. But they have been playing pretty well, and it could be a tougher than normal matchup for that Seattle top line. Like I think Seattle 1 would be in play for me. If I was playing 20 lineups here tonight. I think a single entry tonight, it would just be too much of a stretch to get there. Like, I don't have a problem playing them. It's just, I think there are other spots you can go. Like, the Columbus top line is in that price range. The Buffalo second line is in that price range. One of the Vancouver lines is in that price range. There's just a lot in that price range. I'd rather play in a single entry, but 20 max, I would have interest in the McCann line. On the Vegas side, like for me, it's the Carlson Smith Amadio line. At least we have a sample of them generating something. But Seattle's been clamping things down defensively. I think on the Vegas side, if anything, it would be one-offing some guys, like maybe like a one-off Amadio, one-off Marchessault, those types of things. I'm not stacking anything on the Vegas side.
Yeah, I'm not either. And even if it is Marty Jones and net, like if a Vegas stack beats me tonight, the sun will rise tomorrow and I will make another idiot or something. I don't know.
I mean, Vegas stack can't get there. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's just, when you see them coming in over-owned, and there are other cheap spots on the slate that you can go to that we've already talked about, like, well, just mention Carolina 1. Like, if it is Aho, Jarvis, and Nason, that Carolina line would be in line with the Vegas prices and at much lower ownership. So that's just kind of the problem for me.
Yeah. I think my favorite Golden Knight would be Alex Pietrangelo tonight, and that is a professional segue into the defenseman. That's why that is not why Jake pays me. He pays me for my devilish good looks.
Yeah, I was going to say it's because of how handsome you are.
Yeah, look at this bald spot, man. It's because I didn't wear a yarmulke when I was a little Jew boy. But anyway, defensemen tonight. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to live in the mid-range to cheap tonight. If I am spending up, it is Pietrangelo. I guess Josh Morrissey will be in. I can't stand that PR machine. I think would be the spend-up option for me. Who you like in spending? Like, do you have anyone that's expensive over 6K that you really like? I guess Dougie.
Yeah, that was like other than Pietrangelo and Brent Burns, it was Dougie Hamilton. As long as he's in the lineup tonight in that matchup, I'm a pretty big fan of Dougie, especially, 6,800 is a pretty reasonable price for him. And I think that's the cheapest he's been in 5 or 6 games. So at home against Buffalo, I'll take it. Mid-price guys like Quinn Hughes is at the top of the list with a bullet. Like I said, that guy's been playing like 28, 29 minutes with Vancouver, like eliminating from playoff contention weeks ago. Like, I don't know what's going on. Literally, no other Vancouver defenseman over I think it's the last 10 days is skating at least 20 minutes a game other than Quinn Hughes. I don't know what they're doing. They're not even like trying out the young guys that they've signed. Gotta love Rick Tocchet. Mikhail Sergachev, maybe not as hot on him now that Joseph Woll might be starting, but I think he's certainly in play. I have Jeff Petrie because he's playing basically nearly as many minutes as Chris Letang. And like I said earlier, the Pittsburgh power play isn't anything to write home about, and that's basically the biggest reason to play Letang over Petrie. So I don't mind Petrie. Devin Taves obviously is in play for us again. This is a slate where I like a lot of cheap guys, though. Like, I'm looking under 3K, Ben Hutton, for sure, with the Vegas injuries. Henry Jokiharju, I think, is only 2,600. He's playing like 23 minutes a game for Buffalo. John Marino and Olli Mata. Mata might play over 20 minutes again, or close to it, for under 3K, so don't mind him. Jack Johnson, last Tuesday of the regular season, I got to say it. Not as high on him now that Bowen Byram is back in the lineup, but Jack Johnson's been playing more than Eric Johnson. So, that's something I will say about the Colorado defenseman. Evan Bouchard is at the top of my list with a bullet for very obvious reasons. Jonas Brodin, if he's in tonight as well. Keep an eye on Philadelphia because Rasmus Ristolainen was a lone defenseman on the top power play unit of their last game. He's relatively cheap. Like, I don't mind playing him as long as he's on the top power play unit again. Justin Schultz from Seattle. With Vince Dunn out, he was kind of like their de facto number 1 power play defenseman. So I don't mind Justin Schultz as long as Dunn's out again tonight.
Hold on. Please hold.
Yeah.
Actually, okay. Boom. The one defenseman I will add is Cam Fowler at 4,200, especially if you are playing the Ducks. I don't know why you'd be playing the Ducks, but they do have a 3 total. Cam Fowler 2 games ago played 39 minutes in an overtime game. He's been averaging over 25 minutes a game for this past 10, 15 games. He's kind of point dependent. He's not a huge peripheral guy, but at 4,200 for those minutes, I'll take a stab.
Yeah, Don't mind that.
Let's talk a little bit about these goalies here. I was going through these games when we're talking about it. There just isn't much that I like in net tonight. I guess like Devin Levi, if he's confirmed, which I think he is. Thatcher Demko, for me, is in play 8,100. Like, there just isn't like a spend down option. Like, I don't mind Laurent Brossoit 7,900. Are there any cheap guys you like?
He's not super cheap. The way I do my goalies is always check the projection and then see who's projected to face a lot of volume and then just kind of cross-reference. I went through the list twice and I only wrote down one name, and it was Stuart Skinner. So he was the only goalie that I actually had interest in. Vitek Vanacek at home for New Jersey, as long as he starts. Vasilevsky at home. I think he's a reasonable price against Toronto as well. But honestly, I think Connor Hellebuck certainly, as long as he starts, is perfectly fine to use on the road for 7,400. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think this is one of those nights where I wouldn't mind spending up, $8K, 8,200, 8,400 for a goalie or whatever. Like, if you want to play an 8,200 Vanacek, do it. If you want to play an 8,100 Demko, do it. I don't think this is necessarily one of the nights where you have to run out and play super cheap goalie. I mean, whoever's starting against Carolina for Detroit, whether it's Husso or Hellberg or whomever, maybe it's Ned at 6,500. I would play 6,500 Ned going into Carolina, but that's about it.
Yeah, Vasilevsky is going to be chalked tonight. He's 7,200 at home. So, I don't know, man. Like, I think he's a good play. It always worries me playing Vasilevsky when he's cheap because he's going to be over-owned. Toronto could beat anybody. Tampa doesn't give a crap about this game. So, yeah. Who you looking for your hat trick pick?
Might be kind of chalky, but whatever. Just going to go with it. Let's hope the Philadelphia Flyers can let me down one more time. Travis Konecny.
Nice. I'm sticking in the same state. With the theme of laying pipe, I'm going Big Dick Rick, Ricard Raquel.
Okay.
We will be back. I live for those reactions. We will be back on Thursday for the final show of the regular season. So thank you for sticking with us through the final for the whole season, and we'll see you on Thursday. And good luck, everybody.
Bye.
Good luck tonight, everyone.